We're back with Tim Dick, founding board member of Reef Tech Hawaii and an active member of Hawaii Venture Capital Association and the Hawaii International Film Festival.
Were you always into helping the community, or did you develop that later in your career?
It's something that I had been doing early in my career when I was an engineer. After I became a consultant, after I left business school, I wound up becoming a global corporate management consultant. My responsibilities there were truly global, and at one point I flew around the world 4 times without ever once stopping at home. The challenge and one of the dissatisfaction with that job, ooh, sounds really cool, global practice head, ooh, great, they lure you into this, it sounds very attractive, and then you realize, holy crap, what this really means is I'm trapped on a plane for an average of 26 hours every week for the rest of my life, and that was my long-term average. What I found is that I was not able to have a social life. I was not able to do anything in the community and other kinds of things. I learned a lot. I had a great time, and we did some truly remarkable things. But at the same time, the trade-off and the cost was enormous. So one of the reasons I actually left BCG and began pursuing startups was actually to get a life back and to fill back in something that was really sorely missing, or a whole bunch of things that were really sorely missing for me. So I think there are careers where you can fool yourself into diluting the fact that you can have a family and be part of the community, but realistically you can't. So that was one of the reasons I left consulting.
That's funny that you said you left consulting to go into a startup to have more time.
Yes.
That's funny.
Yeah, well,
it's normally opposite and way opposite.
Well, the thing you find out is that, if you have global practice responsibilities, you're basically working 24 hours a day because you're not at home, you're on a plane, you're with clients, you're with teams. Your life is simply just not your own. So it is you can pretend that you're not working, but at the end of the day, you're working 24 hours a day.
I thought BCG has some kind of thing where you're not allowed to work over a certain amount of hours or whatever, and if you do...
We're not allowed to bill. We're not allowed to bill more than 40 hours a week.
Oh, because I read something in Inc. magazine or one of it said, they're trying to take it easy on their people, and if they work too many hours, then they get flagged and so on. I'm thinking, I don't know about that.
Well, who knows? I think the firm has really recognized some of the stresses on the consultants, but at the same time, you have choices in your career path no matter what firm you're at, and somehow or other I sort of got lured into what sounds like a very sexy kind of position and so forth, and what you realize is eventually you're trapped. If you've got clients in Moscow, Redmond, San Francisco, London, and Frankfurt all at the same time, you can't simply say, I'm out of there and I'm not going to be your relationship manager anymore. So, to some extent, I guess I blame myself. I could have, had a lot more San Francisco-based and London-based clients, but I was very focused on what I wanted, what I was doing there, and some of the interesting things, the very interesting things that we were doing as a firm.
A lot of the things that you seem to be involved in are related to the environment, and it, the environment has always been an issue, but recently it's really become an issue for many. What triggered this passion for you to, help the Reef Tech Hawaii, and could you tell us a little bit more about that organization? Yeah,
that's kind of an interesting story. Years and years ago, back in the early to almost the late 90s, I would charter a large sailboat down in the Caribbean and take a bunch of friends and we'd go sail. And it was always the second week in December every year. For the most part, we sailed the same islands. And when I first started going down there, the coral reefs and the snorkeling and the diving was just spectacular. And then over time, it seemed to gee, there's less fish here. And then, after a few years, 4 or 5 years, something is really, really wrong here. The coral bleaching was in effect, and you basically just watched reef death happen over a period of about 5 or 7 years. And that was really, really shocking to me, to watch an entire ecosystem die over a very large area. And when I moved to Hawaii, I realized that the reefs here were actually, they weren't not in great shape for the most part, but they were much better than the Caribbean. And I thought, this has got to be a good thing to get involved with here, because we're not at the stage here where we have major reef death events. And part of it is climatological as well, but it seemed like a very logical thing to do. Can't not let something like that happen in front of your eyes and not be really changed forever by seeing a whole ecosystem die. And so it just became a moral issue on my part. I've got to do what I can to try to stop that happening here.
What's the most innovative social program that you've seen in a for-profit company?
Sort of a foundation type of a thing.
Or basically, for for-profit companies, trying to figure out how they can impact the community in a positive way. but not detract from their business model.
Right.
You know, what's the most innovative thing you've seen that's been implemented and worked?
I really like the 1-1-1 kind of programs. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but 1% of equity, 1% of employees' time, and 1% in kind, and so forth. And obviously, we're just starting service at Hawaii Superferry, so we can't really fill out all of those pieces. But we gave 1% of the equity, 1% of the stock in our company to the Hawaii Entrepreneurial Foundation at the founding of the company. And so as that equity becomes valuable, we have a liquidity event and so forth. That turns into cash that can then be used for good in the community and so forth. 1% of our employees' time to targeted nonprofit activities. We're just now barely growing up to the point where we have enough employees to actually make a difference. Once we get into service and we sort of then have a level employee base, we'll have about almost 200 people there. That can really start to make a difference. And then 1% in kind. We have a great service, and certainly particularly for neighbor islands, we can really make a difference, whether it's helping kidney dialysis patients in Kauai because they don't have dialysis centers. You travel back and forth. Whether it's helping the school bus, the school team that can't afford to travel to a sports championship or a hula hula or whatever it is. We can really make a difference in the community with the kinds of transportation services that we're providing. And so that 1% in kind. I'm a big proponent of that because it's not a huge burden on the company. If you think about it carefully, most companies have ways to really make that work and really make a difference. It does take some thought, but that's a model I really like and really espouse.
Thanks for joining us today on Greater Good Radio. For more information or a transcript of today's show, please visit us online at greatergoodradio.com. This is your host, Evan Leong and Carrie Leong, saying please join us next time for another episode of Greater Good Radio, Hawaii.